Yes. And we're rolling. Hi, hello everyone. My name is Pancho Gostowski, and today I will be your host in this Roasting Marshmallows episode. Our resident host, Rolf Surt, is on a well-deserved vacation this week. So, Rolf, if you're listening, hey, hello from us. Today I'm joined by my standard colleagues, Henrik and Arno. How are you guys doing?
I'm not standard, man. What are you saying? We're doing pretty
You're
good.
Standard on the podcast. Arno?
I do feel like standard, so I'm perfectly fine with it. I'm like the filler.
Yeah.
That's what I've been told, so that's good.
And today we're joined by our, I think, first intercontinental guest, Clayton Dewey. Coming
Wow,
from,
second.
Second?
Oh,
We had Woodzal.
Second
Oh,
one.
we had Woody Rule. Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry, Clayton. But first guest from Colorado.
Actually, to be honest,
first from Colorado. I'm honored.
Yeah, first from Colorado. Hey, how are you doing, Clayton?
Apparently pretty good because I got to this podcast an hour earlier than we agreed to. Jumped up right at 5:45 a.m. my time. Ready to go.
I'm really honored to hear your commitment to our podcast.
Yeah.
But there is also a great story about you missing flights from the past. So maybe you can tell that story about how you read time. So this is just a typical Clayton thing.
Oh yeah, I was super excited to go visit Ponche for his wedding and had a flight out at 12:30 a.m. and my plane ticket was printed. Well, the confirmation that I got in an email said 0030, and I had misread it as 3 a.m. 300 and put it in my calendar as 3 a.m. And so I was up in the middle of the night waiting. It's like, well, if I have to be at the airport at 1 a.m., there's no point in going to sleep and then waking up. So I was just staying up, trying to keep myself awake, and it's 11:30 and just killing time. And I just nervously go back to my confirmation email and I look at it and I'm just like, oh shit, this isn't 3 a.m. This is 12:30 a.m. My flight leaves in 20 minutes. And
Did you make
so
it?
I, in a panic, I was like, I'm going to miss my flight. I'm on the phone with the airline. It turns out I could either pay a late fee or a cancellation fee for the price of the ticket, or just buy a new ticket for the same amount of money. And I mean, yeah, because international flights, they're not very lenient with you. So I called Ponche up feeling very bad, and in typical Ponche fashion, he was like, wait, you misread the time of your flight? I'm like, yeah, I'm so sorry, man. I'm so sorry. He's like, hold on. I need to put you on speakerphone. And he was in the van with his family, and he's like, tell the whole family what you just did, you idiot. He just roasted me. They just all laughed at me so hard. But so that was actually the most expensive mistake I've ever made in my life, I think.
Oh, then it's quite cheap. Let's not go on that list. I can beat you up on this.
I think you are. That's a huge understatement. But let me introduce you briefly, at least, about my perception. So, today we're going to be talking about career switching and career transitioning, and our guest Clayton, who you just heard part of his story. He is as a complex amalgamation of different personalities as a person can get. And what do I mean by that is Clayton is a father and an activist, a former elementary school teacher who then became a PHP Drupal developer, then became a co-owner and a worker in a corporation, advocate for political prisoners, a UX designer, a recovering anarchist, and a product owner. So,
Wow.
yeah, you have quite some remarkable transitions in your life and in your career. So I think you're really the right person to talk about career switching. You studied humanities, English, Spanish, and political science, whatever that is. So it's not really a typical profile that gets into IT. So I think I think the discussion right now is how how does a person with that background come into the IT? And yeah, maybe start with what did you study and why did you study whatever it is that you studied?
Well, I went to college originally to study environmental engineering, and I took one introduction to political science course just out of curiosity as an elective, and I fell in love with it. I my teacher was like, no one ever gets an A in this class. It's very hard. But if you work hard enough, you can get a B. And I just like ate up the material. I read the book front to cover. I studied my butt off, and I got an A. I got the highest score in the class, and I think ever maybe.
Wow.
And I just really, and I hated calculus, and I like did not want to do it. So I switched from. I was planning on going into environmental engineering and then decided, okay, well, I really love political science. So I talked to my counselor and he was like, yeah, well, you could do something like environmental law. So I was like, okay. So that was my plan, was to go to law school and become a lawyer and study and practice environmental law. But as I got further into my studies, well, I had heard about a study abroad program that our college does where you live in a small town in Mexico and you conduct an ethnography. You study some aspect of society that you're living in, and you also teach English as a service project. And I had a few friends that had done it, and it sounded really cool. And I was already studying Spanish as well. So I was like, this is perfect. I can finally get better at Spanish. Because at that point, I had kind of reached that limit you sort of get from studying another language in a school setting. And I was like, I really just want to become more fluent. And so I did that, and that was through the sociology department. And that just completely like veered me off the course of political science. I got really into sociology. I got really into Spanish. And yeah, and I did that. I lived in Mexico for a semester, and it was awesome. Really, really eye-opening. I learned a lot. And yeah, and when I came back, my counselor was like, wow, Clayton, you're supposed to be studying political science, but you keep taking Spanish classes, you keep taking sociology classes. I see here that you're a DJ at the radio station. That's great, but that's not going to count towards your major. And she's like, but you could actually graduate a year early if you changed your major to humanities. And I was like, oh, great. So I graduated a year early by changing
Doing
my
something
major.
that you are not planning to do.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of typical of my path is start down one path, get distracted and interested in something tangentially related, and then follow that and see where it takes me.
And how does it later on, like because Pancho mentioned a lot of changes, so I'm actually having a hard time following which one it went where. But like, when did you decide that you're like, oh, I want to go into IT or software development?
Yeah, so that wasn't so after I graduated college, I was like, well, what do you do with a humanities degree? And I realized you can't do much. I was like applying to work at like an ice cream shop. It's like, wow, this really is not. But I had, my time in Mexico teaching English, I really enjoyed it. I loved working with kids. I loved teaching. And so I got my teaching license and became a teacher. And really, in a lot of ways, I got pushed out of that profession. I don't know if I don't know if it's this way in Europe. Do you all have a tenure system there where teachers, after they've taught for a certain amount of time, they have certain career protections? It's called tenure.
I have no idea.
Based on the faces you're making, I think not. So it's a big deal in the US. So it's this very strange system in which after you've been teaching for a certain amount of time, you get something called tenure. It becomes very difficult to fire you. And I think the idea is around academic freedom, and you've kind of earned your stripes, and you're like a teacher. You're protected, you know. And
Yeah, okay.
so I was on my last year before getting tenure, and
Then you decided to change.
no, no, I was fired.
Oh,
I was fired the
Yeah.
year before I got tenure, and it was a whole mix of things. I mean, one of the reasons was, so it's a weird system. It's a very weird system because that year the school district I was teaching in was going through serious budget cuts, and the challenge with the school is you can't fire tenured teachers. You can only fire non-tenured teachers. And I had actually met with a guy who was becoming a principal, and he was at a principal's summit, like a conference for all the principals. And the district straight up told them, if you can find a reason to fire any of these non-tenured teachers, please do it, because we need to cut teacher positions pretty drastically.
sounds like a bad system.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and so a superintendent, and so they were doing that. They were going through the rounds. The like big district bureaucrats were going through every school, visiting every classroom of every non-tenured teacher, looking for people who could be fired. And
And then what happens to the classes? Do they just split up the classes to other teachers? Just bigger classes, or how does it work?
yeah, basically bigger class sizes. So I don't know how much of that story to get into. But I was fired. I was fired along with two other non-tenured teachers at my school, and actually my principal and assistant principal were fired from our school. So, and it was a real shock to me. I was on the school leadership team. The previous year, I had received like advanced reviews from my principal, like that I was doing great.
Yeah.
I had even had a conversation with my principal like a month prior, because I knew about some of this conversations. I was like, "Hey, Andy, I'm kind of nervous about," and he's like, "No, you're doing great. You're gonna get your tenure." But you know, the district that's higher up than him, they're the
Have a
ones who
different
call the
plan.
final shots. So I was heartbroken. I mean, I had moved my family to that neighborhood to teach in that neighborhood. We lived in the same neighborhood that I taught in, and it was like my whole world was turned upside down, because that was my whole plan, was to become a teacher. And the extra hard thing is that when you're fired, you are not allowed to work in that school district again.
Seriously.
It's like a crazy all or nothing system. So I was like, and there's so much shame in that, right? Like,
Yeah.
I can't teach in this entire school district now.
It's like a witch hunt to some
Yeah,
extent.
it's really weird. And
How
it's
do you
really,
pick yourself up after something like that?
yeah. It was hard. So I got a teaching job in another school district, in like a neighboring school district. And I mean, the good thing was like my principal was even like, he's great. This was out of my hands. It wasn't my decision to fire you. I will advocate for you. So when I was applying for jobs, and other districts know this, like they know that a lot of teachers get fired their last year before tenure, because the school district doesn't want to give you tenure necessarily. So I was able to get another job. It wasn't too hard. I had good reviews, including from my principal, which helped a lot. But at that point, I don't know, I was very jaded. That like whole experience made me very jaded about the school system. And I also made a terrible decision and taught 6th grade, which is like the worst grade to teach, at least for me. Like kids at that age are just so, I don't know, man. They're not interested in school. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
I think like anyway. So I was like, I need a change. This is not for me anymore. It was already being a teacher is very hard work, especially in the U.S. Like you're underpaid, overworked. You don't get the resources you need to do your job right, and so I was over it. I was like, I need something else. So.
But do you think it broke you, like emotionally? The system, the whole thing that happened just broke you. That's the reason why you want to move away. Because some people just live for teaching, right? Whatever happens, they still want to do it. But for you, that's not the case then.
Yeah, I wasn't teaching the way I wanted to either, though. Like the trend then, and it's gotten a little better now, but it was really bad then, was teaching to a standardized test. There was like not a lot of room for creativity. There's not a lot of room for...
Yeah.
So I wasn't even teaching the way I wanted to teach. And when you're not...
It's like factory work.
And I hated that. I hated like the way I wanted to relate to the students was not the way I was relating to them. And it was one of these like, the system changed me much more than I changed the system kind of thing. Yeah. And so, and I was a parent of young children at that time too. So I would come home from work like burnt out and not have a lot of energy left for my own kids. And I hated that too. I hated that feeling. So, and I was like, why, for this much pay? Screw this. This is not worth it. So, yeah, I mean, the average teacher in the U.S. work is 3 to 5 years is their max, and that's how long I worked. I was a statistic. I lasted 5 years. So,
and then was that the moment that you decided, like, okay, I'm gonna go choose something else that either pays more, or work less, and that was your encounter with IT?
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't know what I was gonna do at that point, but well, I decided kind of halfway through the school year, the last year I taught, I was like, I need to make a career change. I need to have something else lined up after this school year's over. So what I did is I just started talking to different friends of mine and friends of friends in different careers that I was curious about. So I went out for drinks with a friend of mine, Bart, who we had built a website together, like a community news site, basically, and asked him about that, and he was like, "Yeah, I really like this work, and I really like this community." We built it in the content management system Drupal, and he's like, "Yeah, the Drupal community is really cool. It's all about like open source. There's a lot of like activist groups that use Drupal for their sites. There's a lot of nonprofits and just like people doing good in the world that use it. So it's kind of got this altruistic sort of orientation."
Yeah.
And there's a meetup. There's a like monthly meetup in Denver, and so I started going to those meetups. And the first meetup I went to was like very bizarre. It was like it was as if you like took the English language and you kept the words, but you changed the meaning of everything. And I was like listening to people saying things, but it made no sense to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I have a lot to learn if I'm going to be in this field. But I just kept going back to the meetups. I started reading blog posts, picked up a book.
But did you start
on
did
it.
you start going to the meetups before you finished your teaching career, or already?
Yeah.
Okay,
Because
so
I decided
the seeds early.
Yeah.
Early in the yeah.
I made that decision and I landed on web development. I was like, okay, this seems like a good path. I enjoy doing this work. I knew I enjoyed it from like my hobbyist kind of.
So you already knew how to build a website before that.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, with Drupal, it's like very much there's a graphical user interface for a lot of it. So I didn't really know. I knew a little bit of HTML, but not much.
And then
But yeah,
you
so.
basically join those meetups, and that's where you like start learning, or do you also, like you said, like read blog posts, but did you have like some sort of like a mentor or something?
Yeah, so that guy Bart who took me out for drinks, he became my mentor and we started working on a project together and he took me under his wing and that's where I became a Vim guy,
Oh boy.
live in the terminal as much as you can.
I'm sorry, man. You went out in the weird direction. VI, Vim, and PHP. Like, it hurts.
Yeah, I know people like to dog on PHP, but I don't know.
Might have a reason. Might have a reason. Just saying.
Yeah. I think what I like about it though is just how widespread it is and
Yeah.
like how common it is, and like
Yeah, that's what pests and
it's a
diseases
juggernaut.
often are.
Yeah, Corona. We are stuck now because it goes really quick. Doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah. So,
Like, how long does it take for, like, for example, from you, the moment that you start working with, like, or studying, like, PHP, Drupal, to actually get, like, your first paying job?
Job.
yeah, 2 years, I guess, is the short answer. I did like freelance work. I started just doing, kind of freelance, first things like my mom's yoga website and my friend's, blog, my friend of a friend's lawyer, like brochure site. And
Yep.
Like, how
that
many
sort
years
of
ago
thing.
was that?
That was like 12 or 13 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you actually deal with the finances then? Was that enough to, because if you transition, usually the pay gets less because you're more in a junior position, I would say. How did you deal with that then?
Yeah, so my wife at the time worked, we basically switched. She was working part-time, I was working full-time. And so we switched to like, she was working full-time, I was working kind of part-time. And we also we borrowed, my parents, I think, loaned us a little bit of money, a few $1,000s that we then paid them back over time. So, I mean, that was super helpful, right, to have like a wider support system to make that transition. And it was, I mean, and not everyone has that, I know. So
Yeah.
that's something to keep in mind for sure. Although I will
And sorry,
Well,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, it was really cheap to make that transition into web development compared to other careers. I mean, I was looking at being an X-ray technician. I mean, you have to go back to college. You have to
Yeah.
pay thousands of dollars in tuition for that. So,
Especially
if you
in
don't
US.
have, especially in the U.S. So, I mean, it's a good field to transition into. And if you don't have, I mean, a lot of people don't have a family who can lend you, that much to float you.
Yeah.
But so I think it is worth looking into. Can you get some kind of loan from a more formal institution to help you? Because I mean, I did take an online course through O'Reilly, and that was a few hundred.
Oh, yeah.
I think that was maybe $1,000 total. So I mean, still though, like
Yeah, it's nothing. Like, the investment is really cheap. If
Yeah,
I mean, but you
and
also
then
had
the return is huge.
you had the mentor, right? So that helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, generally,
So what is your,
go ahead.
going through each other. Okay, so you are transitioning from full-time to part-time. So in my mind, that means you have the children.
Yep.
How do they feel about that?
Well, they loved it because they saw me much more than they used to, and-
But they leave the mother behind a bit, right?
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was good. I mean, yeah, it was good overall. That was a nice aspect of it was being. I mean, because I was working from home, at that point. So
Yeah.
No, so but the moment you started, like you say, started looking into web development in this case, Drupal through your friends, and then you started going into meetups, then you started doing courses and like practicing, and then by the time you get like a full paying job, it took about 2 years.
Yeah, and actually less than that because I got a job it was funny. I got a job teaching Drupal and like intro to HTML and CSS at a radio broadcasting school, which sounds very weird. Like they basically were like, well, the internet or the radio is going more and more digital. You need like your communication skills needs to include things like managing content on a website, and they had decided that Drupal was the best platform at that time for the students to become familiar with. And so I got a job earlier on. I would say that was so if I started. Well, and the other thing is there was an overlap, right? So I started studying web development while I was still teaching. So I basically started March of 1 year, and I don't know, I could look at my LinkedIn profile. I think it was maybe like 6 or 9 months after that I got that teaching job.
Yeah.
And I mean, the nice thing about being a teacher is I was paid through that summer, right? Like, because I was on a salary. So I had the whole summer to study and still get a paycheck, which was really helpful. So I was still getting paid for 6 months of that studying period. So it was only like, I'd say like 6 months where I didn't have that teaching job. That teaching job paid peanuts though. It was like, still, it was something though. I mean, I was making some kind of money.
And then
plus
like
the freelance gigs,
The 2 years that you said, then you join like a normal company building software, and then you became a full-time developer.
Yeah. So I was in a course, like a in-person full day. It was a back-end development course for Drupal that I was in, and my dad's a software developer, so he taught me a few things, but quickly learned that his skill set and what I was studying was very different, so he only taught me a few things. But he did teach me one really awesome terminal, like command line command shortcut, which is the $pound. Do you know this one?
Pound.
So if you're typing,
Sounds like a hashtag, right?
If you not the hashtag, exclamation point.
Yeah.
If you so it will take the last variable of the previous command that you used. So if you like wanted to change into a directory and then do something with that same directory, then you can just do the command $bang.
Pound.
and I did that while like an instructor was helping me. I was like, no. He's like, oh wow, you know that shortcut? I'm like, yeah.
I think your instructor did not know.
He was like very impressed with this shortcut that I knew, and I think it conveyed that I knew more than I actually did, because he was like, well, we're always looking for a few good developers on our team. If you want to interview, I was like, okay. I mean, I'm just learning this stuff, to be clear. And he's like, that's okay. And I'm like, okay.
So that's the tip number one. If you want to impress, if you're learning how to code, use shortcuts, exclamation mark, you might get a job interview.
Yeah, exactly.
Fake it till you make it.
So it was a very weird interview process. I mean, because I was like, I was kind of deer in the headlights. Like, I'm still learning this stuff. I don't really know how well I can do, but they liked that I was getting into this because of more reasons than just a paycheck.
Yeah.
They're very like open source minded, this company that I got hired with. But I didn't feel prepared. But they hired me anyway. It was really
And like,
funny.
did you felt like a
That's good.
imposter
Yeah.
syndrome kind of thing, or like? 'Cause
Yeah,
I
but
know
I
a
don't
few
think
people who did change careers and they are all the time like, oh, I never know anything. Oh, I'm always behind because I did not do like a proper bachelor. Did you ever felt the same?
Yeah, well, I felt this way at this company for sure. And I had a terrible time. I was in over my head. I did not know what I was doing. I had to ask for a lot of help. And they they fired me after a month. They were like, I was about to quit because I was like, I can't do this job. And I told them from the beginning, like, I don't know that much yet. You know, it's like, I was not even applying for jobs at that point. So it was funny. Like, it was a funny experience. And we were both like, no harm, no foul. I'm like, no hard feelings, man. Like, I tried to tell you that I think they just thought I was being modest.
Yeah. But did you learn anything on that job?
I did. Yeah, I did. I mean, I mostly learned that I was right. I was like, yeah, I still have more to learn. And it was weird though because I had been offered a different job like a couple days after I had accepted this job with this first company, and that position sounded much more doable. It was like junior level Drupal site building, which I had gotten pretty good at. I was still learning CSS. I knew HTML pretty well. I mean, there's not too much you have to learn about HTML. So that felt like a much better fit, but I had already accepted this position. And so I emailed them back. I'm like, hey, remember
I just got fired.
yeah. And they were like, okay, well, yeah, let's, that position is no longer, but maybe, well, yeah, come in and we do have this other position open. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll try. And luckily they gave me a skills test and I did not pass it. I did not know a lot of it, which did not surprise me, but that was helpful. It was illuminating to know what I knew and what I didn't know. So, and they're like, okay. And they're like
something in between. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of going to drift from it. What do you think that first company could have done differently? Because
they could have given me a skills test. I kept telling them, I'm like, I don't know that much, and they're like, it's fine. I'm like, what am I gonna do here though? Like, I don't understand what I'm even gonna do at your company. And they're like, well, as long as you're like good at learning on the spot, then you'll be fine. I'm like, well, I am a fast learner, but I didn't know what the baseline was even going into it. So
did they provide you with maybe the support structure around that you can actually that facilitates learning?
No, that was the other reason why I was like, I'm gonna quit. Like, I was on my own most of the time.
Yeah,
they were expecting.
But you were asking for help, no?
I was asking.
You did mention you were asking for help.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't have like a formal mentor at the company, so I was basically just asking coworkers, and they would just have they weren't accounting for that as part of their job.
No.
So they were very helpful. I mean, they were very kind, but they were like, I can't spend this much time helping you.
Yeah.
You know?
So the organization didn't have the right size to support like a person the experience you had.
Yeah. So I failed that skills test, and they were like, I think you'll be ready in about 2 years for this kind of position. I was like, dang, okay. Well, I'll keep studying, I guess. So I just kept going to meetups, kept studying. To
me, it's like you've been like jumping these hurdles every like few months. There's like another hurdle, and it's like, okay, here we go again. I'll jump this one, and then it's like finally I think I'm almost at the finish. Oh no, you have to do this and this, and that can be very discouraging.
Yeah, I mean, it was encouraging to get a job without even like applying for jobs. So, like, and I got severance pay from it too. Not a ton, but I got something. So, and
Severance
that,
pay after a month?
yeah.
Wow.
I mean, not that much. Like, it was like another extra
Yeah, it's
week
still
of
pretty
pay or
okay.
something like that.
Yeah, it's
But
still pretty good.
it was something, you know. And it was at that time. I mean, the demand for developers was so high. It was crazy. I mean, and
Still is,
it
yeah.
still is. I don't know if it's quite on that level, but
No.
it's still pretty high. I mean, and I was still getting recruiter emails constantly. So I mean, yeah, I wasn't.
But
Yeah.
but in the end, you moved away from it, right? You moved away from the development part.
Yeah.
At least that's what I read on your LinkedIn. Well, moved away from development, I should say.
Yeah, so that company, that second company that gave me the skills test that I didn't pass, and they were like,
Yeah.
they were also very active in the Drupal community. They like sponsor the Drupal meetup, and I just kept learning, and I just kept going to the meetups, and they were like, okay, actually, and I volunteered at Drupal camps, and they knew my skill set at that point, and I think what they saw was that I was like a real leader in, even though my like technical skills were still pretty junior, my leadership skills were pretty good. Like I was helping organize, some of the meetup events. I was helping organize the camps at that point. And so from like a social, like the soft skills, I guess a lot of people say, they were pretty impressed. And so they,
And
yeah,
these
they,
skills, would you attribute them to your job as a teacher?
yeah, yeah, a lot of it was from that for sure. And from being an activist, like you learn how to run meetings effectively, you learn how to coordinate volunteers, you learn how to set up events
Yeah.
from that kind of work. So they, so they like kind of built really sort of a position, like a sort of a site building, client facing position for me, essentially.
So they based you,
Yeah.
they hired you based on your attitude. So
Hmm.
and like or perhaps work ethics, even though maybe your core technical skills were not that very high. I think this is actually
Yeah.
very common in a lot of these people who are switching careers from different backgrounds. And it's really it it in that sense it makes the landscape in IT world more heterogeneous. It's not like the typical IT profile, but more people with different skill sets and backgrounds. It makes it more interesting and work to be part of.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And that would be like my advice to people kind of transitioning into this field is to get involved in a community if you can. Like that's what you start to know people. They start to see kind of your whole self in things and everything you bring to the table. It's hard when you're just looking at a resume to kind of assess what a person can
Yeah.
do and not do. But if you volunteered to organize an event together, that's where you get to see if someone knows how to take initiative, knows how do they work with other people, and yeah, I agree. I think some of my favorite people I've worked with are people who have like non-traditional backgrounds to get into this kind of work.
And
And
that you had
yeah.
like bad experience in this transition, like pushback of, let's say, when you join a company and then people look at you like, hey, you don't have a developer background, or you did not study proper software engineering, you are just a teacher. Did you had any of those nonsense experience?
I was actually pretty fortunate with this company because a lot of them came from non-traditional backgrounds as well. In fact, there was like a joke in the office of like none of us have a computer science degree, and we're doing this work. And then like they finally hired someone with like a formal CS degree.
Was he good?
Damn it. They were good. They were good. Yeah. So they already kind of understood that and saw the value in people having come from different places into this work. Yeah.
And like for how long did you worked as a developer?
So I feel like even from the beginning, I worked. So the company I joined at that point, they were still a bit of a startup kind of culture of like everyone just kind of pitch in and do whatever it needs to get done kind of a company.
Yeah.
And I was one of the more social and like client-oriented people. So I quickly was doing a lot of client communication and thus a lot of like project management and a lot of like discovery work. And so it really was like, it was a pretty quick transition from doing more like building out features that a client requests and more of like the upfront information architecture planning and I started to bring in a more intentional, like I started studying that aspect of it. I was like, okay, there's actually like words for this, like content strategy and user research and so
So that's when you moved to become a UX.
Yeah.
So you basically transitioned directly from, did you go from a developer to become a doctor and then came back to UX, or you just stayed in IT this time?
Yeah, no, I just stayed. I've been in here now. I'm probably not going anywhere either. This is the path I'm on. Yeah.
And then like you worked, so then you did your transition to UX, and this transition was also the same? You joined like meetup groups, or it was just more like, just happened?
Yeah, that was more just an internal change, like in our company. We grew as a company, and so we could have more specialized roles. And so rather than me doing both, like say, like building out a blog and building out an events listing page, that was now more and more specialized to just a developer. And I was now just formally like an information architect. And then eventually it evolved to like user experience designer, only to be more encompassing of not just information architecture, but like the entire user experience, Yeah.
And do you like that part of the work better than or more than a developer?
Oh, so much more. Yeah. I really hate writing code. I do not have the attention to detail and the patience for it. It feels so tedious to me. I feel very spoiled actually as a user experience designer because I'm like, I get to make the wireframes. I get to like talk with the client and decide and come up with like what we do. Now, of course, I'm doing that in consultation with developers and other designers. So it's not like in a silo, but still like I'm like eternally grateful for developers to like put the actual vision into practice because I don't have the patience or the skill set to do that.
And so if I hear this, then would you consider that your first 2 years investing in development would have been better to just like, if I have done already UX works would have been better for me?
Yeah, I don't know. It was hard. That is one of the big challenges getting into this field is there's so many different areas of expertise you could study and get into. And my advice to people getting into this work would be just pick something and just start going with it and see where it takes you. It might be you might like go in and then back out and be like, never mind. But it's all interconnected. I mean, I think that I am a good information architect because I had spent that time, like, I understand database structures, and I understand with Drupal, I understand like what is easy to do in Drupal and what is difficult to do. And so I take that into account, like understanding the underlying software that you're working with and the affordances that software has is important to keep in mind, because you are working within those constraints.
Yeah.
So I think it was actually good in the end, even if it meandered a bit. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. And how did you all get into this work? Was it more traditional? Did you study it in school and then?
Yeah, well, for me, it was kind of, well, my father, when I was a kid, he had a IT company, like in the sense of like selling hardware. And eventually he built an internet provider, and then basically I grew up in computers and I somehow played a lot of video games. So I always knew that I wanted to work with software. And then I automatically, in university, that was my, I did kind of like a bachelor degree in it and post-graduation after that. But it was always definitely on the traditional, if you will, like way of doing things, going to, proper or formal studies and then applying for your internships and things and then eventually getting a job. So that was my background.
So for me, it was a bit different. When I was younger, I used to play a lot of video games as well, because we had a computer at home as well, like an old one, and that was through the whole course of my youth. But I always wanted to be in the cars, actually, to be an engineer of cars. I don't know, a mechanic, I mean. And so I tried that on school for a year, and then I figured out that I really hated that my hands got dirty.
Oh, poor you.
So I was like, for you? So, okay, I'm like, this is not for me, A whole youth, I thought it was a bit cool, but once I actually did it, I didn't like it. So then I got thinking, like, okay, what do I do like? And I was also always fiddling with the computers. So I was like, let's go in that. So I first started with system administration and so managing Linux machines, Windows machines, and stuff like that. And from there, I rolled into programming. And that's where, well, I actually do like the tedious stuff, I guess. So that's where I stayed.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of my past.
Yeah, and for me, I did have a formal education to some degree in IT. It was really wrapped up with a lot of electronics and automation. And I did work for a few years as actually a developer, but I soon realized that I did find it also super tedious. Exactly, I didn't really have patience for all the details.
Yeah.
So I naturally gravitated to more, organizational roles. And I guess that's where I kind of stayed.
Yeah.
Ever since. And still within the same domain, still working with people who do that work, and like you, eternally grateful for everybody who contributes to it. But then, you make a team together, I suppose.
I have to say, for somebody who had a formal education in IT, you are the worst person that I have seen using a computer in my life. I think my grandmother used a computer more like savvy than you.
Then you do realize that I was smart enough to realize that early on in my career.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah.
So,
I'm not good with computers either, and it's part of what I actually think helps me be a good user experience designer. The same way that when I was a teacher, some of the best teachers were the ones who were dyslexic or like math teachers who struggled with math as students. Like, how difficult this subject matter can be, and so how to teach it and break it down into simpler parts for other people. And with technology, like, if you've grown up around computers your whole life and it's all like very easy for you, it's hard to see the pitfalls or like the things that aren't intuitive to other people when you're designing an interface. And I mean, I grew up with computers too, so I still have my blind spots, but I think I think that's one thing that I encourage people who are thinking about getting into this field is you don't have to have grown up around computers and be like very familiar, like comfortable in that field. In fact, that discomfort can be a real advantage,
Yeah.
Depending on the job that you choose.
Yeah, I
In
think
that.
it's
As we've heard.
yeah, I think it is an interesting one, like because a few jobs before that I did, like coaching some teams, and a lot of them came from a non-IT background, and and I think it's can be tricky, right? I think some people just literally like, oh, I heard the money is better. I don't really want to study this, but I heard it's better, so let me give it a shot. And then I think I personally have a hard time with that because they're not trying to get. I don't have a problem they are in for the money, but they are not trying to improve their skill. And then I think it's quite detrimental for, wow, everyone involved. So I don't know per se how I feel about this trade-off, right? Because let's say at least when you go to a proper formal education in 4 years, you need to put the minimum amount of investment to actually get the job, right? But then in IT, of course, you can get anybody to work.
Well, wouldn't
Yeah.
so I get your point. So normally, if you go through formal training, you have more maybe strict criteria, and the bar is maybe higher that you need to go through. And now, well, maybe it becomes easier to get into. But then, wouldn't it mean that over a period of time, people would anyway be selected for whatever the progress? I mean, anybody who is in this sector who doesn't develop themselves on a daily basis, they're not gonna advance.
I think it will be
career.
true if because it seems the demand keep growing, right? It's still that haven't stopped, and it's like I think there is a talk about Uncle Bob. He talks about that the number of developers needs are growing, and the number of developers in the world is growing every 5 years. So basically, it's have not showing any sign that this is going to slow down. So eventually, yeah, there is too many open positions. So I don't think the quality of the work is going to dictate who gets a job or not, because there is more jobs than people right now.
Well, then the quality will be determined by you being able to attract the high quality people.
Yeah, or yeah, getting more
Yeah.
paid or salaries and this kind of thing.
Sure, whichever
Yeah.
way, whatever is going to motivate them, by probably purpose.
Yeah, but the
yeah,
point,
Interesting.
yeah.
yeah, but the point
Because I
is-
think, I think that's kind of going back to like, why the hell did I get hired at that one company?
yeah, it's exactly.
When I think I was being overly modest too. I mean, in my interviews, I was very sincere and very passionate about like I got into Drupal work because I built a community news site and it was awesome and it made a difference. And this technology is very powerful, and I want to bring that to other people. And
Yeah.
they were working with nonprofits, and so they already had a mission. They just didn't put me in the right position and onboard me the right way. I mean, I was very successful at the second company that did hire me. They understood what my skill sets were and what they
Yeah.
weren't, but they also understood like I mean, I want to get paid more for sure, but really ultimately I got into this because I was really attracted to like the open source ethics. I was attracted to like the fact that this software is helping these nonprofits like get their work done more efficiently and reach new people. And so, yeah, I mean, I think like the paycheck is good, but you also need to have a deeper purpose as to why you're doing this work.
Yeah.
And then people hiring, same thing, like in the interview process, figure out like what do you have? And if you don't have it, then you probably won't go as far as someone who like has some
Yeah,
other
exactly.
like broader drive for this work. Yeah.
So you, most of the work that you've worked in your career is for nonprofits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
I think because I it's easier for me to buy into the purpose behind the website. It's really I didn't like. I could probably get into working with more companies if I believed in their product, but a lot of times I'm like, I don't really think we need people buying more stuff in this world. Like that's not really the. If anything, we need people buying less stuff. It's like so.
Sounds like a cool product, by the way, to create.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I just like I usually like the mission that they're behind it more. Not always, but for the most part.
Yeah, the altruistic ideas about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have enjoyed been working with more universities, and that is a real mixed bag. Some of it is okay, but when universities are doing some interesting things around like how can we take this research that we're doing and make it accessible to the general public or people outside of academia, that stuff is really cool. And so like I recently worked with Harvard on it's called the Media Manipulation Casebook, and it's a collection of case studies of times people have been able to manipulate the media into spreading false information. And it's really interesting. And it's cool to get that into like the general public instead of like locked away in some very dense academic paper that no one's going to read except for other academics,
And maybe.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. I actually have to check in with them because the site launched a few months ago, and like now's the time to check the analytics and see like
Has anybody read it?
who's reading this.
Yeah, maybe we can promote it also here.
Yeah.
But you also, for a big part of your career, well, I don't know if it's a big part, you were part of cooperation with other workers, co-owners.
Yeah.
How did that come about? How did that idea start?
That came about like so many things with the election of Donald Trump. It was like this moment in our country of like, holy shit, what is happening? This is nuts. I need to do something more than what I'm doing right now. And I had this idea of, so I was getting a little bit burnt out on making websites for large nonprofits, and was like,
it's also a thing. Large non-profits.
Yeah. It
sounds like a non-profit corporation.
Yeah. There's like I don't know. Not every large nonprofit is this way, but you reach a certain size though, and you can kind of get more invested in maintaining your own institution rather than like
The cost.
changing things for the better. And I mean, and even if you're doing good work, I was kind of like, I don't know, if you look at the percentage of nonprofits, you have a handful of gigantic ones, but then the vast majority, if you see a pie chart, I don't know, it's like 90% or something are like very small. And I really love those groups because they're like they're much closer to the problems that they're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And so I really was frustrated that we weren't able to serve those smaller nonprofits. And so I wanted to develop a platform, kind of like a Squarespace or a Wix, but that was open source, that was more relevant to them. And I felt like there was sort of a sweet spot between like, you're bigger than a WordPress site, but you don't have a budget to afford a Drupal site. So I wanted to figure out a way to make Drupal affordable for those nonprofits. And I tried pitching it internally with the company, and they were just like, I don't know. I don't think this is going to work out. Or just like, this is a cool idea, but we just can't do it at this company. Like, we just don't.
So what did you do?
I quit, and I joined with some other folks in the Drupal community that I've been talking to about this idea, and tried to get it off the ground, and ultimately it failed. But in doing that work, one of the agencies involved in this idea. Was Agaric, and they're a worker owner cooperative, and so in doing that side project, I got to know them better and ended up joining their company. And so so they're all worker owners, so they share in like the ownership tasks of like the financials and running the business and generating sales and so.
So why did it fail? Why did it fail?
I have a lot of ideas around that. Well,
But which
Man.
part? Which part fail, Arno? The co-op or the
sort of
platform?
the platform. So it's called
Yeah.
Drutopia. It's still around, so I don't know if I should say it failed. It failed in the sense of becoming a project that could pay a salary for people to work on it. It's still going as a volunteer project, and so in that sense, it didn't fail. After we tried to model it as a co-op, also as a multi-stakeholder cooperative in which you pay for a website and you're also a member of the project, so you have a say in like the roadmap of the software. And my opinion, I don't know, some of the other people on the team might disagree or have their own ideas. My opinion is that we just did not get the upfront capital to be able to get it off the ground as a financial effort.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do for a cooperative. There's a lot of, anyway, we needed to be more business minded, in my opinion. Like, how do we like attract customers, and what's our like business plan to like, we need to get this many users by this time and blah, blah, blah. And we just didn't do a good job with that.
Yeah, like the metrics about it. Yeah, on it.
Yeah. I think there's still a need for it, though. I still think that there's, I think WordPress is great for like brochure sites, but as soon as you start needing a bit more functionality, I think Drupal is a good fit. And the project is recognizing that it needs to address the needs of smaller entities more, but it's got a ways to go still. And maybe there's some other platform out there. There's like, yeah, like you all said, PHP is not the only game in town anymore. So
We've been going for about an hour up until now. Just before we wrap up things slowly, I wanted to maybe hear more about your like co-op venture, and maybe your final idea. Why did you step out of the co-op? Because it sounds really interesting. I think for a lot of people it might be very appealing. You join a company and you are maybe a co-owner, and everybody is, and you share equally everything. Did you also have equal salaries there?
We did. You don't have to do it that way, but we did it that way. Yeah.
Something we also did
We do.
as of recently. So what was your experience so far? Like with the co-op, what were the positives and maybe the things that you learned out of it? And why did you decide to step out of it?
Yeah, the positives was that there's like a level of transparency I'd never had at a company. It was great. It was great to know how, like the previous companies, I didn't even know how much my other coworkers made, which was kind of weird sometimes, you know, and especially when you're negotiating your salary, you're like, I don't know how much I deserve necessarily. So there's a very high level of trust when you're in a cooperative, because you're really in it together. You know, you know how the business is doing. You know exactly how your work brings value to the company and what you need to do to make it successful. And when you're successful, you experience that directly, because you know when the company's doing well, you do well. And it was really great to just see it holistically. This is everything that goes into running a company, you know, instead of just like, this is my job description, this is what I do for the company. I'd say the downside is kind of the flip side to that. Like, I was doing a lot more sales, for example, than I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be doing more I wanted to be doing user interviews and user research. I wanted to be designing wireframes, and I was still doing that, but a big part of my time was also all of the administration of the co-op and I think also just the challenges of small business. It's a co-op of 5 people. And actually my current agency is 5 people too. So, I mean, there's some of the stress of being the small guy, the little fish in a big pond. But, I think that, like, to be in a cooperative, you have to understand that you're going to be wearing more hats than you might wear as a regular worker in a company that's owned by someone else.
How is it now different? You're not that also generally active in everything?
Yeah, the company I work for now is really great because it's like just enough transparency. Like I did actually just find out how much my coworkers make. It's very flat too. I think there's a little bit of discrepancy, but and the 2 owners are awesome, and they basically do more of the administrative things at this point, but they both have more of a one person has always been in business. The other person used to be a front-end developer. So, but they're both very, I don't know, when you're 5, you still have that team mentality. I get to focus on user experience design more. I still help with sales, but not nearly as much as I did as a worker owner. So I love it. I'm like very happy with my current job. It's like the sweet spot of like, I feel part of the team and I feel like I have influence on the business, but I don't have to stress out. I don't have to be kept up at night about sales numbers and all that stuff. Yeah.
All right. Now, we've been going for about more than an hour now. I think we should slowly wrap up things. Any last words of wisdom, Henrik, from your side maybe?
No, really, just thanks for sharing your story. I'm pretty sure you're going to inspire someone to join IT and actually try and see that, those, at least you inspire me with those blockages in life and you just overcome it. So it is actually pretty nice and admirable to actually hear you telling like, it was just a fun moment somehow in life. Didn't seem like you struggle with it, but I can imagine that was struggling. But yeah, thanks for sharing.
Arno, from your side?
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I did like the tedious part. So if anyone listening wants to move and doesn't like the tedious programming stuff, don't move. Do something else. Apparently UX is a good idea.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think at least in the Netherlands, where we're based, there is quite a lot of options for people who want to switch careers and get into IT. There are actually even programs of people who are actually paying you to learn. They're actually giving you something like a full, maybe I don't know if it's a full salary, but pretty good amounts of money to make ends meet while you're studying for a few months, and then they also have the responsibility of placing you at a company. So I think that is become more and more accessible for people who want to make that switch, and there is more and more courses formal for people to do this. So yeah, well, if you're stuck in a rut in a position and you don't know what to do with your career, well, look into this and maybe you find your next inspiration.
Or talk to us.
Or talk to us, or talk to Clayton.
Yeah.
Clayton, thanks a lot. Thanks for getting up very early on your end to be able to talk to us. Until next time, thank you to our listener. You can follow us at Twitter at Forescouts and visit us at podcast.forescouts.nl. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks.
Bye.
The Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Scoutcast, Roasting Marshmallows, with your host, Rolf Surd. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit forscouts.nl and on Twitter @forscouts. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on Scoutcast, Roasting Marshmallows.